Você sabe, historinhas da Campus Party. Você sabe que todo dia que eu estou falando aqui, de repente entra essa musiquinha, corta o meu microfone, vocês já passaram por isso, né? Aí ontem me explicaram, tá certo? Que a musiquinha é quando eles abrem a transmissão da Campus TV, né? Para que todo mundo possa assistir. Valeu, galera da Campus TV. Agora eu entendi por que da musiquinha, tá certo? E vocês sabem aqui que a Campus TV é a forma que a gente distribui esse conteúdo para todo mundo. Tem gente do mundo inteiro acessando online, ao vivo, aqui a Campus Party. E melhor que isso, todo o conteúdo da Campus Party fica gravado e você pode depois acessar e assistir via internet. Então, se você perdeu alguma palestra, você não pôde, né? Ficou, farriou a noite inteira, está dormindo até agora, não está assistindo a palestra do Jonathan aqui. Amanhã você pode assistir, tá certo? Ou na semana que vem, pode assistir online. Graças à galera da Campus TV. Valeu, galera da Campus TV. Uma salva de palmas para a galera da Campus TV. Porque tem conteúdo pra caramba na Campus Party. Tá certo? O palestrante nem chama, o palestrante já entra no palco. Tá certo? Né? Deixa antes de falar do Jonathan, nós estamos aqui com o Jonathan LeBlanc, mas estamos aqui também com o Jeff Prestes, tá certo? Que é o cara da PayPal aqui no Brasil. Jeff, a PayPal no Brasil, ela está forte, tem escritório, tem o site em português, tudo funciona, integração com todos os bancos, tá certo? Como é que está o mercado da PayPal aqui no Brasil?
Não, acho que para quem está querendo empreender, até o nosso amigo, ou qualquer um que precisar empreender aqui no Brasil, pode contar com o nosso suporte. A PayPal dá todo o suporte para o desenvolvedor, então você tem um site para desenvolvedores com conteúdo em português, com detalhamento das APIs, com tutoriais, e tem o nosso time também comercial, que está até aqui na Campus Party, também está lá perto da nossa bancada, que também, se alguém quiser tirar dúvida de integração, de qualquer coisa, pode contar com a gente. Aqui a gente dá todo o suporte para o empreendedor.
Então, essa era a minha outra pergunta. Vocês estão com uma bancada bacana aqui na Campus Party. O que essa galera aqui pode sair daqui e ir lá para a bancada fazer o quê?
Então, a gente está com umas experiências de internet das coisas. Tá até uma ideia da palestra também do Jonathan falar isso. No PayPal não é só mais mundo online. PayPal também está entrando no mundo offline, ou seja, no mundo real, não vai mais ter separação. Você vai poder usar o PayPal não só na sua compra online, para comprar, como, por exemplo, a entrada para Campus Party, mas você também vai poder usar o PayPal para comprar, sei lá, numa loja de conveniência, numa loja de roupa, você também vai poder usar o PayPal.
Muito legal. Então é isso aí, galera. Nós vamos ter aqui essa palestra da área de desenvolvimento, certo? Uma palestra, né, que vai focar exatamente em você que é desenvolvedor e vai mostrar um pouquinho de como é. Vai mostrar um pouquinho de como é. Oi? Não. Essa é a frase, certa? Ele tá me colando aqui. Vai mostrar como é que vai ser a reconstrução do comércio. Mas eu queria dizer o seguinte, que vai mostrar para você como é que o comércio está mudando, tá certo? Como é que o dinheiro está mudando, tá? Como é que você, desenvolvedor, pode fazer parte desse processo, certo? Então, sem mais delongas, com você, da PayPal, Jonathan LeBlanc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. What if I were to tell you that there is an industry that has been around for centuries, for generations? It has helped to build countries, it's helped to build cities. And what if I also told you that this same industry is what helps build our financial future? It helps build our careers. It helps build everything around us. And it also has the potential of destroying our entire livelihoods. Now, the banking industry and the financial industry has changed a lot in the last 20, 25 years since I was a kid. And when I was around 8 years old, this was in the late 1980s, early 1990s, my parents really wanted to teach me the value of savings. So what they did was they took me to our local bank, and they said, okay, well, just deposit your money into a savings account. So I opened up a new account, and I deposited $10, because that was the minimum that you had to deposit back then. That's unheard of nowadays. But I would deposit $5 here, $2 there, and I feel good about savings. Every month, I would get a little statement in the mail that would show me the money that I had deposited and the interest that I'd make off it. I actually made money off my money while I was in the bank. Now, over the years, I would keep depositing, but the amount of interest that I'd be making every month, the amount of money that I made would change, and it would go down and down and down. And after a few years, what ended up happening is that they started taking money away from me. So my savings account, the money that I was trying to save, was going down even further. So I was thinking, well, why have my money here in the first place? So I took a lot of it out, but I left some of the money in there because I needed a bank account. I needed it for basically doing anything around me, for if I did have a job later on. I was still a kid at this time. Depositing anything in there instead of putting it in a sock drawer. But I left a little bit in there. But unfortunately, I hit below a certain value of apparently $100 or so that was now the minimum to have an account. So not only was my interest dropping, but also I was getting penalty fees on top of that. So within months, that money that I had saved was gone. I had a negative balance and they closed my account. Now this story is important because I guess it was a life lesson for me. It's helped me realize that the banking industry has changed a lot in the past 20 years, even though it's been around for centuries and centuries. Over the past 20 years, we've seen a institution that used to appeal to everybody, that used to young, old, poor, rich. Every single person used to be able to be a part of this financial industry and be able to build their entire their careers off of it, being able to deposit money, savings, and actually get money from that. It's not true today at all. So let me start by telling you a little bit of a story about the industry that I think that is really falling behind in banking and finances, and where it's really ripe for changing in the entire world, in the entrepreneurial landscape, and why we're leaving so many people behind. What if I were to tell you that the same banking industry is leaving 50% of the people that it should be representing out of nowhere? And even those 50% that it can still maintain, they're not really enjoying their experience, and it's not working for many, many people. So my story starts when I was starting to go to college. So this was around 1998, around there. I was around 17 years old. And when I started going to college, my parents, about a year before, they had a business, they had built a house for themselves. They were building out their lives. Unfortunately, they ran into the same situation that a lot of people do worldwide. They had lost their business, they had to give up their house, and they had to move to a completely different city and rebuild. Now, this is true from many, many people around the world, that this exact same thing happens. And I'm not talking about the US here. This was me growing up in Canada, so an area where we have a lot of good financial programs in place. And really, what happened there is as I started going to college, I had no alternative but to look for student loans, like many people here. And when I applied for those loans, it took about 3 months to hear back. It was right before I was going to start college. I got a notification from the loan office saying that because of my parents' financial background, they made too much money for me to get loans. I was living not in their house anymore. I had been paying my way for quite a while at that point. And I would never ask them for money because they were just being able to barely pay their bills and rebuild their lives as it was. So I got into an interesting little predicament in the world where I didn't qualify for any loans because my family background. So what did I do? I ended up taking a few jobs while I was in college. I would go to school early in the morning, finish probably around 4 or 5 p.m. I would go immediately to my first job at the dry cleaners. I would go work that until closing time, around 9 or so. I'd get home, taking the bus over there, back home, and I would work web development and design contracts until around 1 or 2 a.m. Rinse and repeat every single day for 4 years just to be able to put myself through school. And the problem that I ran into is that money wasn't enough. So in order to pay my rent, pay my bills, pay my school, and those freaking expensive textbooks, what I had to do is I had to take out alternate loans from banks. I had to take out credit cards and start putting things on credit with the intention of paying it back. Old me now realizes young me was stupid, but that's okay. That's besides the point. Once I graduated, a lot of this had to be paid back immediately. So the credit cards I wasn't able to start paying back, so I ended up defaulting on them when I was younger. I destroyed my credit to the point where by the time I started my first job right out of college, I wasn't able to open a bank account. I had to go through hoops to be able to try to pay back some of these loans that I had taken out before, which I should be doing. But it made it almost impossible for me to work because I wasn't able to deposit the money into the bank. Now, since then, I've gone through and I've repaid everything I had ever borrowed because that was a particular painful part of my life, and I realized that everything that I borrowed, I needed to pay back. I didn't care if they forgot about me or not. To make myself feel that I mattered, it had to be paid back. But those hardships of going through that experience and rebuilding my credit over years helped me realize that in an instant, you can destroy your entire future life. It took me so many years to rebuild everything that I had lost within probably a 6-month span. And the reason I'm telling you this is because this is one of the major issues in many different countries around the world, is that people are put into these predicaments where they have no alternative but to turn to sources like this, to credit, to loans. And it ends up destroying their lives. And many people can't pull themselves out of that. I mean, my story is one, and there's a lot of people that share the same story, but there's a lot of people with much worse stories than mine. Fortunately, I was able to build something for myself, but, just those hardships. If anything that we are doing with technology nowadays to rebuild and fix that banking industry, to fix the entire financial industry, to be inclusive of the entire worldwide population, then all of this is going to be a good story and a good thing to push our technology towards.
So I was trying to wait for your good moment, but this microphone is not on. People should translate.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. We're just going to switch microphones here really quickly. Copy that. No problem. No problem whatsoever. Yeah. All right, we're back. So realistically, all the technology that we're building towards the financial industry is all coming into to repair everything around banking or everything around finances. I feel so strongly about it because of my personal background, but in the background of many of the people I speak to. So it's an important lesson to note that a lot of people will go through this in their lives, and this is the reason why we need to fix a lot of this. So fast forward to when I had started my career within PayPal. It was probably about 4 years ago. I was at a conference and speaking to some of the other sponsors that were there. And one of the sponsors that happened to be there, they worked as tech mentorship for underprivileged areas for kids. So they would go to these underprivileged cities, and what they would do is they would have mentors from technical areas, like myself or other speakers, other engineers, and they would teach them about all the technology that they could use to pull themselves out of this. And he showed me a map in the US at least, and it'll go worldwide in a second, that the areas of impoverishment and the areas that they're really focusing on. Now, it just so happened that about 3 weeks prior, I was building a list of global areas where there's massive startup trends, massive entrepreneurial growth. And it just so happened that every single main area of massive growth among startups and entrepreneurship happened to be in the exact same cities of mass impoverishment of the poorest people and the people that were trying to bring themselves out of it. So I looked at this globally and tried to look at these same trends to see, well, is this the US only or is this actually the entire world? Turns out it's the entire world. What this tells me is that when you have technology mentorship, when you have the ability to have the same privilege as all of us here in these areas where they might not have access to everything like that, then the same people that are being beaten down every day, and the same people that are in these hardships, will take it upon themselves to build everything around them. They're basically saying, I don't care what's happening around me. I don't want to be pushed down any further, and I want to fix the world around me. This is exactly where technology comes into play for us to build this. So, if you look at the entire global population in every single place in the world, every country falls into maybe one of three different categories of actual growth and entrepreneurship stages. Now, typical of the third world countries, you have technology and entrepreneurship that's built by basic needs. So, water, food, shelter. Being able to sustain the existing population of that country, being able for everyone to actually live, not just build businesses on top of that. That's our main concern within these locations. But quite honestly, they're not in that, they're not ready to be able to build into entrepreneurship growth, into innovation. Then you have a lot of building countries that are driven by efficiency. So they're really they have the basic needs of their country being built out. They have the infrastructure, they have the schools, the police, the fire departments, everything that they need. But their country is starting to look into the entire global population. They're starting to look outwards and say, well, what is being built out in the rest of the world that I can do? That would improve my country. And at the exact same time, building startups around that is building out the entire economic growth of that country and bringing every single person into that global economy. Now, most of the first world nations happen to be building businesses based on innovation. If you look at most of the Latin American community, with especially Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, those are our major entrepreneurial centers within Latin America that are heavily growing, a lot because of startup growth and rebuilding and governments providing money for that startup growth. And realistically, they fall somewhere in between these two right here. Massive trends towards economic growth in the countries, massive trends towards startups actually coming into the country as opposed to leaving, which means that most of Latin America is on the cusp of being a major superpower with in the elements of startup and entrepreneurship growth, building in innovation. So they have a real chance to make some massive changes into the entire global population and global economy. So if we're looking at these trends, there's really something that we should be looking at, and that's the elements of a missing market. I hinted at this when I first started speaking, that the banking industry fails for about 50% of its users. So if we look at that, on the entire global scale, every single 7 billion people in the world, if we look at that entire population, the adults that are able to own bank accounts, only 50% of them own a bank account. That number is astronomical. These people have a multitude of different reasons, and it's not even just the impoverished areas. There are so many different reasons why people don't use traditional banking systems. And it's much more to do with how the banking systems have become in the last 20, 25, 30 years. How they just do not work for people. And to me, when something stops working for the vast majority of its potential customers and its potential clients and the actual users who need those services, it's ripe for disruption. It should be burnt down and rebuilt into something that we can use. So one of the areas that we really look at is the underserved population. So it's actually about 53% of the global population of the world, it might even be a little bit more, that don't have those banking institutions. Now, if you've tried to buy things online, you tried to work online with a lot of payments, trying to work outside your economy beyond just cash, you'll know that having the backing of credit cards, having the backing of a financial institution, a bank, is required. To be part of that global economy, you have to have this financial backing. Well, what about all those people that either choose not to be part of the banking system They might choose to not have to deal with all the hardships and basically a lot of the fees and a lot of those structures. But what about all the other people that have no alternative, no choice? Well, what do? Well, sometimes it's cultural based. Sometimes there's a whole bunch of different reasons for why someone wouldn't want to use a banking institution. But this is exactly why the entrepreneurship around this area is growing. So when we're really looking at the underserved population, what are they? Well, they're the unbanked, which is that population I've been talking about, those people who don't have a bank account, don't have a credit card. Traditionally, within most countries, the way that they work around this is by things like prepaid cards, or they might work through alternative financial sources. So in the US, there's things called Payday loan services, which we'll get into in a minute. There's also loans from families. There's a whole bunch of ways that people get around this. The barter system has actually become, it's coming back in ways of trading phone cards and trading cell phones and hardware and jewelry. The barter system is coming back because it's not working. The financial situation is not working for the vast majority of the people. We shouldn't bring back a system that became antiquated generations and generations ago when we can rebuild it with the technology we have today. Now, once you actually overcome that banking situation where a person doesn't have a bank account, doesn't have a credit card, you actually get into a really tricky scenario, and this is one that you typically see in a lot of first world nations. So what happens is the country and a lot of the financial institutions require multiple lines of credit in order to identify you, to secure you, to ensure that the risk is not there. Now, the underbanked population are those that only have one source. They might have a prepaid credit card, they might have a bank account, but that's it. They only have one. And that's actually a significant part of the population that's being built out in a lot of the first world nations. So these people run into the situation where they're not even addressed in the entire unbanked population because they're not seen as having the need for that. But they absolutely are, because they're getting left behind in the same way. Having no credit in most of these developed nations is the same as having bad credit. So they're in the exact same situation as every other person. These are our statistics on global trends, on where this unbanked population is. So if we look at this from a global scale, you'll see really how the countries break down. East Asia, South Asia, about 59% of people are completely unbanked. No bank accounts, no credit cards. In Latin America, it's about 65%. Now, this is all of Latin America. I believe Brazil's around 35%. In Central Asia and Eastern Europe, 49%. And think of Eastern Europe, for instance. A lot of developer talent here, just in Eastern Europe, just like there is in Brazil. A lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurial growth. A lot of them leaving. In Arab states, it's 67%. And then this high income value is first world nations. So you get Canada, Netherlands, mostly Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, US. So all of them, it's around 8%. But that's not indicative of all the countries. So take the US, for instance. The US is 25% unbanked, and it goes up to 50% of the underbanked. So 50% of the population is either unbanked or underbanked. It's a really high number when you really think about it. And so we have this problem everywhere. It doesn't matter what country you're in. It doesn't matter what situation the country is in, if it's developing or it's developed. Every single person has the same problem where the banks are not working for them. And why? Well, that first one that every person thinks of, and it's the exact same thing I thought of when I first started working in this industry and working with this population about 4 years ago. I thought, okay, it's the impoverished areas. This is something that we can build towards because we know where those are. Well, yeah, that's one. But it also has to do with geography and culture. So some geographical areas might not have banking institutions around them. They might be in rural areas. They might not be anywhere near a bank or any financial institution that they can build upon. So that goes away. The cultural one is pretty interesting. I didn't really understand this until I went to Russia to speak. So Russia incredibly cash-based society. We were having, we have a global hackathon series through PayPal called Battle Hack, and we were in Moscow, over the last couple of years. First year that we went there, we were trying to pay people for food, for drinks, for services, everything that we needed to run this hackathon. And we had our credit cards, we have our company cards, so we're thinking, okay, no problem, we do this everywhere. Well, no, that doesn't work because everyone from their jobs, the vast majority of the population is paid in cash, envelopes of cash. You pay your vendors in cash. So basically, we had a briefcase full of cash that we were bringing around us. Makes you feel safe as you're walking around, doesn't it? But that's how we had to pay people, in cash. That was cultural. That has nothing to do with their financial situation whatsoever. It's completely driven by culture. Now, there's financial institutions that have come in to remedy this, but this is just one of the areas that you can see of why people are unbanked. If you have families that have previously not used these institutions, and there are many, especially ones who move to different countries, that emigrate from their countries into another, then those are more likely to follow suit with their children. It's learned habits. So we learned the habit of not using the financial institution and follow suit. Then there's a language barrier, and this one happens a lot as you have immigrant populations coming to different countries. In the U.S., for instance, they have about 19% of the population is immigrants like myself that came into the country. And a lot of the problems with the banks there is that in order to work with them, it has to be in English, with the exception of some pockets, like southeast Florida, around Miami, where I'm from. That's a pocket where it's heavy Cuban and Mexican influence. So you have large pockets, and most people speak Spanish. But that's not true with most of the U.S. So if you have a language barrier where you can't open an account, where you can't say, yeah, I want to open a savings account, and I'm actually going to the banking machines and trying to take out money, yeah, I can't because I don't understand what it's saying. I run into this problem when I actually travel to different countries. I basically push buttons and hope money comes out. So it works out in some institutions. Sometimes my card gets taken away, but whatever. It works out. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's multiple different reasons, and realistically, trust is another major one. A lot of people have lost trust in the traditional institutions that we've built. And these are institutions that have been ingrained in our population for so long. Having entire populations that take their entire savings and have them hidden away somewhere in their house or in some deposit box somewhere, it's a scary thought because the security is just not there. But what I've come to realize as I've started traveling the globe, as I've gone to country to country, culture to culture, and seen how people work, this is one of the best parts about being an advocate like myself, is you get to realize that there's a whole bunch of cultures that think much differently than you, that act much differently than you, and it makes you realize how small your world is. So this is exactly what I mean here. Every single system that we're building out with technology to fix the banking institutions for this population, for 50% of the world, are different every single country. So let's take Latin America, for instance. Something in Brazil might not work for something somewhere in Moscow because the cultures are different. Something that works in the US might not work in Nigeria. Cultures are different. Their economic stability is different. So there's no silver bullet here. There's no one-size-fits-all situation here where you actually have a single solution that works for everyone. But what you have to build is technology that's inclusive of the vast majority of the people, the more people that you can possibly include in the country. This is the most important thing. But I've come to realize that every single place I go, that system is so broken. Doesn't matter where I go, the system is broken in multiple different ways. It's just not working for the vast majority of the population, whether it be culture or whether it be, just to focus on those who have money. A lot of first world nations, the banking institutions want to focus on who's going to make them the most money. So, if you have a bank account there, you're building up your savings, and you're taking out money here, you're taking out money there, but your account doesn't have that much money, you're going to get a lot of fees. You're going to get a lot of money taken away. Every month I probably get $25 taken from my checking account for having it. I get fees incurred for every time I take out money from a banking machine. And I don't know about the banks around here, but the banks in most of North America have the most ridiculous hours. There's no chance that the vast majority of the population can ever go. I'm getting nods here, so I'm guessing it's the same here. I think it's a way of having you use the banking machines. So, it seems like the banks just want to cater to a specific small subset of people. And that if that's their way, if that's what they're pushing towards and what they're building towards, then that's okay. Because if they don't want to innovate, someone will do it for them. And that's exactly what we're building this technology towards, and we're building a technology around, where everything that we build at PayPal tries to be as inclusive as possible. We try to build technology to solve the problem of an inclusive culture, a global culture. One of the biggest problems that I see with a lot of startups that are coming nowadays, with the exception of a lot of ones that are geared towards areas like Latin America, amazing startups coming out around the sphere to fix this. I've chatted with a lot of people within the Miami area who also work in Mexico City, and they have a really good knowledge on how to fix the financial institutions. But the vast majority of the technology that's coming out from a lot of developed nations tends to err on the side of less risk. You know what the less risk is? The people with the bank accounts, the people with the checking accounts, the credit cards, the loans, the identity everywhere. Basically, the 47% of the other population. That area is saturated with a lot of different startups coming out. A lot of different companies are being built out that are all catering towards that. But there's so few startups that are actually looking at 53% of the rest of the population. So if you don't care about the inclusive culture, if you don't care, about that 53% of the people, can't use these institutions, that's okay. Think about it this way: billions, if not trillions, of dollars are going through the hands of those people, that you can leverage off of in an almost untapped market. So working within these institutions tends to be riskier. So having a financial backing and basically a really hardcore risk management system, those are the areas that we really need to be building up in order to preserve this technology and preserve these companies. But what's our main barrier? Well, you might have guessed it by now, but the main barrier is that they can't actually access these systems because they don't have the cards, they don't have the credits, they don't have anything that they need in order to be able to be part of the global economy. So what do they push towards? What do they have that's left that they can build upon? Well, they have cash and they have their local economy. And to be honest, when you're pushed into a local economy, and a lot of these people are in very rural areas, and some are in inner cities, if they don't have access to the technology to fix their situation, like what I had, I had the technology to do it. At that point, I had the education to do it. A lot of people aren't there. A lot of people aren't as lucky as I was. So those are the people that get pushed down over and over and over again, and they can't pull themselves up. Now, one of the areas that a lot of financial institutions, PayPal itself has tried doing and tried working with are things like prepaid cards, or working with institutions or some sort of technology like that. It's a simple thing that people can get, but they can work. They can still use cash on a regular basis and start moving towards a true cashless state. And when you're at a cashless state, then you can really start pushing yourself to a global economy and start exploring the entire world and all of its possibilities. So prepaid cards have been actually a boon for a lot of people to try to pull them out of those situations and be able to build a life for themselves and build credit for themselves, really rebuild their lives. And that's what the important thing here is. Many people in that situation, they don't want to be there. They're not happy to be there. It's not everyone, but most of them. One of the things, when I was looking at the globe, I was thinking, well, why are people, why can't people get out of these situations? If you save, if you, go back into your communities, and a lot of people, after working in a global economy, tend to move more towards their community values and build up their local community. So in the 1950s, before that, in many cultures, that's how we used to do it. In many cultures nowadays, they still do it. Unfortunately, where I grew up, they don't do it anymore. You can't leverage off of your family unit, you can't leverage off of your community all that much because they're not there. They don't interact as a community anymore. Now, I was trying to think of what services out there are the most manipulative, and how do they keep pushing these people back down? And there's one that I want to tell you about that's US-based. It's the most broken-ass system I could ever think of, and I don't understand why it's still even there. Payday loan services. The vast majority of the states have outlawed this practice completely, but here's how it works. You would go into this small, tiny little building. Usually it's in the middle of a parking lot in the sketchiest area you can think of. You even feel dirty walking into it, like something's bad's about to happen. So you walk in there and you say, I need a loan for a 2-week period until my next paycheck. This is for immediate money when you don't have the financial backing to get it. And you can get loans. So basically, they will take your information about your employer, your paychecks. So you basically will sign a lot of that over to them. They'll have a lot of your identity information. And they'll give you a loan. But as they give you a loan, they also charge you a fee. Usually it's $25, $50, somewhere around there, just for taking out any money. Now you take that loan, and at the end of 2 weeks, most of the people who take out loans, if they're in that situation to begin with, where they're taking out the loans, there's no way they'll be paying it back. And what happens? Well, in that little contract that you signed, where you signed over your paychecks from your employer, hey, you know what? They're actually going to charge me an interest rate. And it's not 5%, it's not 10%. It's usually between 350 to 1,500% interest. Now you tell me how anyone going through that and trying to rebuild their lives can possibly do it when they're getting everything they have, everything they make taken away, just because of one mistake. This is why this practice is being outlawed in the vast majority of the states. And situations like this happen globally. Every single country has some manipulative presence that's trying to destroy the same populations that's trying to rebuild itself. It's incredibly sad. And I would be happy to see every single one of them destroyed and rebuilt into something that works. And the way that we do that is to try to move to a cashless society. And bear with me for a minute. There's a reason behind this counterintuitive measure that I'm proposing here. So as we move towards a cashless society, then we can begin to take advantage of a lot of newer technology. A lot of the technology that 47% of the population can use. A lot of that global economy, a lot of the savings, a lot of the newer technology that's built towards helping all of the population. Towards looking at other economies that are trying to build it, like the startups that are coming out of the vast majority of Latin America. And seeing that there's solutions beyond just going and getting payday loans locally in my rural area. So as we move cashless, we can start to have those options available to us. And quite honestly, there's a security element here. Walking around with a lot of money, in most areas, not a very safe bet for many people. So there's an opportunity here. And it's an opportunity that you actually, in technology that you wouldn't think actually was there. So we've all seen cell phones are everywhere, right? Well, I actually was boggled by the amount of cell phone usage there is in the world. It's not just a claim that I would make that would say, oh, hey, let's use cell phones, right? Because, yeah, everyone's doing it. There's actual statistics behind how this is going to work for the vast majority of the population. So here's a toilet. And I didn't just put it up here because I wanted to show all you nice people a picture of a toilet, even though that's the first time I've ever done that in my entire career. There's actual statistics here. This will put everything into perspective for you. Yeah, more people have mobile phones in the world than have toilets. So think about how long the toilet's been around. Think about, you know that every single person in their house has one. Well, there's more people in the world that have cell phones, feature phones, smartphones, or what have you, than they have toilets. Now, statistics from multiple different journals that have been written around mobile phone usage globally have put the number of active cell phones that are currently in the world, now these are ones that are used, not just there and not hooked up to a network, at between 6.8 and 7.3 billion active cell phones. More cell phones than there are people in the world. Now, we all know that people have multiple cell phones. Yeah, sure, there's plenty of people out there like that. So if we cut out the people that are in that population, we're still left with this astronomical number, that more cell phones in the hands of people than toilets. Yeah, when I read that, I said, nah, there's no freaking possible way that can possibly happen. So I did lots more research, looked up a lot of other articles, and they kept saying the same thing. And I thought it was a big old practical joke, but it isn't. So when I was actually looking into the populations within a lot of these countries that have mobile phone usage, I was thinking, okay, well, the population that has these banking accounts, that has these financial services, they're the ones that probably own the most of these cell phones, right? Yeah, actually, no. The cell phone usage is either at the same level or slightly higher in the populations that are unbanked or underbanked. I didn't think that was possible. Now, most of these might be feature phones, most of these might be cell phones, but as most of the engineers here, how many engineers do we have here? Developers, designers, people in the technology org. Okay, you'll probably be familiar with the term of progressive degradation. So basically, you have something that's the highest technology down to the lowest, and as a person uses the high technology, you give them every option available. As the person drops down in their technology ability, or really the technology that they're using, you still provide the same types of services, but you degrade the performance to be able to apply to them. This is the exact same way that we should be applying technology towards this population. You degrade gracefully based on what their capabilities are, but you provide them the same security, the same identity, and the same services. You just provide it in a different way. So let's look at a few studies, because I can ramble on about this for forever, but when you're really looking at practical implementations from different cultures, you can really start to understand this. So first, let's go back to Russia. I like using Russia as an example because they're one of the few countries, in massive countries in the world, that is still culturally based in cash. They have a startup that came from that country called Kiwi, Q-I-W-I. And what they do is they deploy these things that look like bank machines all over the country. So hundreds of thousands of them in every rural area, every population that you can think of. And the way that they work is that you input cash, so you go to your employer, they pay you for the work that you did in an envelope of cash. You go to these machines, insert cash, and it pushes it up to a digital wallet. Now, think about the implications there. PayPal being one of these digital wallets, let's say the money's pushed to there, then you can start being able to use PayPal globally, because you have that financial backing, because you have that funding source on file. Now, this is to say the truth throughout the entire country, that they can move from slowly from a cash-based society based on culture to a complete cashless one, very streamlined, very easily. Now, this won't happen overnight. It usually happens when one part of the population dies out, younger population comes in, embraces the technology. So the people who are probably about college age nowadays in Russia are the ones that this is going to apply to and build upon. So when they are adults and they're teaching their kids, they're going to move from cash. And they're going to move into this culture of complete cash-based global economy. But if you look at cash machines globally, if you deploy one of those at a bank machine or at a banking institution, they cost about $50,000 US. But these ones, they used a very interesting company for it. So they went to a casino slot machine manufacturer to build these things out very securely. And it costs about $500 US. Much lower rates that you could ever think of. So the money's just taken out in cash, armored trucks taken off, and people have everything in their digital wallets. That's how this works. This is built out of a startup, out of the needs. And this is exactly what I meant about there not being a one-size-fits-all situation, because we're dealing with different elements in different countries. So culturally based here, this works because it was a startup that was founded in that country, that was built from that country, from people who knew how to fix their economy, the people who knew what the problems were with the financial situation. So this is exactly why, as we engage with a lot of different countries, a lot of different regions, why we look at partnerships as opposed to just enforcing our will onto different cultures. That never works. The way that it works is by understanding a culture, working within the needs of that culture and building something upon that. That's why a lot of things like Kiwi exist, building upon partnerships. Installment payments are actually one of the really interesting ones that has come out, because once you overcome that hump of banked, unbanked, of actually having people that are using digital currency, whether that be something based in the currency of the country, whether that be cryptocurrency, doesn't matter. Once they're starting to use that, they have to overcome another hump, and that tends to be into the impoverished areas. So as people who can't afford things see a global economy of things that they want to buy and want to take part in, they might get into the situation that I did in college, where they're taking out credit or trying to take out credit to buy that stuff and getting themselves deeper in the hole. Installment payments are a potential solution to this. So the way that it works is you can buy something and just piece it apart in multiple different payments. It's a simple situation that's actually in a simple financial backing that's been around for a long, long time, and we've used it globally in different means. It's a lot of cultures have latched onto it and really embraced it. But the installment payments are a way to be able to afford the things you need and still pay for them in the way that you are financially able to. Person-to-person payments is actually bringing back an interesting concept. So you remember that concept that I said of a lot of communities in these first world nations being destroyed because they look towards a global economy? It's actually turning around, because while people are inundated with this global economy, they are completely inundated with data, with everything happening around the world, and it's hard to process. It's hard to be able to think on a global scale every single day. So a lot of these communities that are being built out are actually starting to revert back to communities. It's not the families that you would normally have. It's not being built off your relationships from your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents. It's actually friends and neighbors and people actually in your physical, hyper-local area. That's where we can start building out a lot of these relationships, where we can start leveraging off of peer-to-peer payments. Let me give you an example of that. So remember that Battle Hack series that we're running? It's just hackathons where people can build out things for good, targeting that. This is a team from the previous Miami winners. So they won the Miami prize. The two gentlemen on the left, far left is Osneil, and beside him is Jose. They were actually the winners from the previous year in Miami. And what they built out was a very interesting thing based on this cultural norm of peer-to-peer payments. A lot of them work within the Latin American market, because Osneil over there is from Cuba. He just came over several years ago and started working with a lot of startups. Jose's from Mexico. He came over and started building out businesses for himself. So they work together. And they like to win a lot of our prizes. So they're a really good indicative culture. But what they built out was a way to create peer-to-peer payments with everyone working around the banks, because the banks weren't working for them. So they could transfer money, let's say from Miami directly to some of their family in Mexico City. And instead of it going to a bank or a physical building where they can pick it up, any single person can accept that money and pay them out if they are able to. It could be your neighbor, it could be the corner store, it could be the car dealership, it could be anybody. So they basically put the concept of local community and peer-to-peer payments together to build out that concept. And innovative ideas like this that are bringing back traditional values and rebuilding them in unique and interesting ways that work for our current culture is the way to do it. Because technology that's built around an antiquated culture without looking towards the future is going to fail. And this leads us to a lot of the technical leadership and a lot of the technology that we're building upon and building leadership upon. And the reason, and this technology is going to lead us into really working with these underserved communities and the populations of tomorrow. So first and foremost, we as a company, now this is actually one of the things that I like working for the company for, we've started rebuilding the company around these values. I'm not going to go into this spiel about about all the products that PayPal offers. All I'm saying is that companies need to change in order to be able to reflect the populations like that. As we start focusing on things like risk management, those are actually very good tools that can be applied towards engaging with the underserved population. So risk management is important because traditionally this population is much riskier to be able to loan money to. So as you're doing peer-to-peer payments, you want to make sure that something exists. And there's actually something around cryptocurrency that we'll talk about in a moment that lends itself well to this solution. There's a concept that we call omni-commerce. Think of it like this. Hey, you've all heard the term Internet of Things, connected technology. Yeah, you see it all around you here. Basically, that's a way of engaging with people where they need to be engaged with. Instead of working through cash or working through the banks, the way that they work is through a cashless society. They're able to engage via their phones, offline and online. So as we have connected technology, you have a tech that basically connects a cell phone to other hardware to an online source. That online source might be a digital wallet. It might be, it might be that PayPal backing. It might be a credit card. It might be a prepaid card. It might be anything. But it allows them to work in the physical world, and the hardware is being built out to allow them to actually access that, access something that's not cash, access their digital wallet that they've built up that helps build their credit in an offline world. One of the ways that the technology is building towards that is it's basically a part of the Bluetooth specification called Bluetooth Smart. And I know we all know what Bluetooth is here. You have it on your phones. You connect it to multiple different devices. You stream video, stream movies, stream voice. What Bluetooth Smart is a very energy efficient way of transmitting data. Let me give you an example. There are a multitude of different hardware pieces called beacons out there. And what a beacon is a little piece of hardware that you can put anywhere. I can put it here. I can put it in my pocket. It doesn't matter. But what stores can do is they can put a beacon, and when a person comes into range of that beacon, and it's typically anywhere, people will set them anywhere between 50 and 100 meters. You can up that, down that, depending on the power consumption. Power consumption off one of these, they run off a small battery cell like what you have in your watch. And it lasts, they say, around 2 years. That's a bald-faced lie. It doesn't last 2 years. That's on optimal usage and optimal temperatures and conditions. It's probably a year off of that you can run off of regular usage, not upping it. But let's give you an example. This little device here is called a PayPal beacon. It's one of the beacons that we started working with as we were looking at Bluetooth smart technology. So a store, or basically anyone that wants to sell something, I can go into this corner here and start selling things, plug this thing in. A user comes, or a customer comes within 50 meters of that beacon in the store. They enter the store, and it wakes up the PayPal application on their phone and says, would you like to check in? and you say yes, that would be great. If you say no, no information gets transmitted, completely private, completely secure. If you say yes, your cell phone will be bound to this device, to the beacon, and the beacon will in turn communicate with an online service, this one in particular, PayPal. So you go around the store and you pick out all the items that you want. You bring them to the register, you bring them to the store owner, and you say, I want to check out with PayPal. And what happened when you checked in was that your face, the ability to check or to pay with PayPal just became available for them, for the merchant. So they can check you out with your online account, your digital wallet, with anything. And other beacons that are out there, like Blue Cats or Estimote, or any of the other ones that are out there, can do the exact same thing. The technology can be built towards any sort of financial institution that you want, any online backing. But it completely revolutionizes the offline commerce world. So that is exactly why we engage with a lot of this technology, because it has the potential of leveraging off of the exact same population that we are trying to help through the mobile devices, which the vast majority of them have. And finally, the last one I want to talk about is around Bitcoin. And you know, Bitcoin's the one that a lot of the startups are being built out, but realistically, this can be any cryptocurrency. It can be Litecoin, it can be Dogecoin, it could be one of the hundreds of other coins that are out there. We talk about Bitcoin because it's the most valuable and talked about in our a lot of our developer circles. But the reason I talk about this is because it has a huge potential to engage with this small part of a massive part of this population that wants to get to this banked situation. So if they work with a global currency that crosses borders, that crosses, these interest rates, or having money taken away from them just by using it, like you might have when you're taking out things in currency or transferring cross-border. If you've ever transferred money cross-border through any financial systems, you'll know that you incur fees with that, not with this. So being able to use digital currency in a global market truly makes us part of this global economy. There are startups being built upon this that are actually building upon the social and community norms that we've been talking about. There's a company called Ripple. Most of the developers within our organization are always interested in new technology, and Ripple's an interesting one. They realized that transferring money, in this case transferring Bitcoin between two people, and transferring money between any people, whether it be Bitcoin or otherwise, might be tricky. It might be dangerous in the way that you might not get your money, or something might happen to prevent it. But if you have a friend that you're transferring money to, there's a higher likelihood that nothing's going to go wrong. Ripple is one of the ones that's based upon these trust relationships. So what they try to do is, as you're transmitting money, it looks through the entire chain of basically connected accounts, and it sees where the trust relationships are. So user A, user B, they don't know each other, but user A knows user C. User C knows user D. They're friends. User D knows user B. So that's called the Ripple. And the Ripple extends out to build this transfer of money through these trust relationships. It's kind of cool. It's a really cool a piece of technology that reaches into the banks. And it's the exact same reason why a lot of our merchants have asked for Bitcoin wallets to be included within PayPal, which is exactly why they are. I work with both PayPal and Braintree. Braintree is a mobile payments company, so they lead a lot of mobile payments within U.S., Australia, Europe, Canada, etc. And both of them have integrated Bitcoin wallets. So Coinbase is one of the ones that we work pretty heavily with, and a number of other ones that are integrated within both institutions. But that was because the merchants asked for it. The merchants asked for it because the customers asked for it. While this technology is still in its infancy as far as growth into a consumer market, we still have the potential to adopt this to reach the market that we're trying to build towards, and build a technology around something like this. that truly crosses those borders. That's exactly what we're trying to do with every single initiative that we're building out here. And that's why the market is completely shifting. So in 5 years, I would be incredibly happy if every single thing that's in my wallet right now, identification, replaced with biometrics, credit replaced with digital currency, or a digital wallet, my loyalty cards going into my wallet, my digital wallet, everything replaced, getting rid of the stupid wallet. And as most of you know, and most of you are probably just like me, you forget your wallet at home. Okay, I can still work with my phone. I can pay for things as I'm going along. Forget your cell phone, you're going right back home to get it. Yeah. And I'm in the same situation. It's just become a prevalence of technology. And when I first had my first cell phone when I was in college, this was 1997, 98. When I had that cell phone, it was like one of those big ones, not one of these ones. But it made calls. That's all it did. And back then, it wasn't a cultural norm to have your cell phone and talk on it in public. You went somewhere private and did that. Now it's a cultural norm for every single person at your table while you're eating dinner to take out their phones and check their phones and be on their phones. It's a cultural norm now. So a lot of these technology advances are all built around cultural norms, and that's how we fix a lot of the problems that we have today with the banks and the financial institutions, is that we build upon the cultural norms of the countries from startups that are being built from those countries that understand the market and understand their needs, and that's how we fix the market. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. If anything, I just wanted to provide the information on really where we are, that this is actually a large part of the population. Half of the people that you're going to meet are affected by this. And many of you probably have stories similar to mine. So the technology that we're building upon every single day has the potential to be able to help this market. And beyond that, help ourselves build up massive startups to help that market. Unfortunately, a lot of the startups nowadays that have been built out that try to fix the banks keep getting acquired. So Simple was one of those, got acquired as well. So Simple was a startup that was supposed to fix the banks and move it completely towards mobile phones. Acquired. It doesn't really have the value of the startup anymore. But there's tons of startups that are coming out that do really impact this market and can fix the market for so many different people all around the planet. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
A gente tem 5 minutos para perguntas, pessoal. Se alguém quiser fazer alguma pergunta para o John. Pessoal, acho que tem uma pessoa aqui na frente.
Boa tarde. Eu tenho uma dúvida em relação à legalidade das transações, né? No caso, se pessoas começarem a fazer comércio ilegal de produtos ilegais, e também às vezes acontece de empresas usarem o serviço do PayPal para evitar de pagar taxas para o governo. Às vezes o imposto no Brasil é muito alto e as empresas tentam fugir disso usando ferramentas que às vezes não deveriam ser usadas para isso. Mas como que o PayPal lida com isso para não ter problemas e não serem prejudicados por causa disso e não terem problemas com a justiça, né?
So the way that we work with companies that might do bad things on top of the network. Oh, and we have some pillows to hand out, so we'll be handing those out to people as we go along. We have a number of them, so we'll end up throwing them out. So the way that we handle a lot of the merchants, a lot of the customers that might do bad things on top of the network is through our own network. So everyone that's going through, let's say, the PayPal network has to go through things like our risk management. Our risk management is built up of not just technology, but a lot of people. It's not just technology folks like myself, it's also federal and local law enforcement in their particular region, which makes it a very unique organization. So, let's say you have something that looks suspicious, out of the norm for the user, or out of the norm for the application, taking users' information. That gets flagged automatically within the PayPal system for manual review. The people in the risk management organization look at that, look and review that organization or the company, and they see if there's doing anything fraudulent. If they're doing anything fraudulent, they block their accounts. So that is how we handle a lot of the merchants, is through our own systems.
One more question.
Considerando a popularização dessa carteira virtual, qual seria o papel dos bancos, assim, o futuro dos bancos? Eles iriam se tornar concorrentes, iriam seguir esse ramo, ou você acredita que eles só deem um suporte por fora?
So the banks themselves, or do you want translate? The banks themselves, they're in a situation now like most companies out there in the finance world. They completely need to innovate in order to be relevant for our culture and for the current times. You know, unfortunately, they're innovating the opposite way as it is now over the past 20 years, innovating towards focusing on the people that they can make the most money off of, right? The housing crisis that caused, you know, throughout the U.S. and Canada, that destroyed a lot of the global economy, was caused by a lot of that same things. Giving money to the people who really shouldn't be affording the things that they had. It's a weird U.S. cultural thing that tends to come through. But the banks themselves, if they don't innovate, someone's going to innovate for them. They're going to rebuild these institutions. I've seen them build out new technology, but realistically, the vast majority of the population just doesn't trust banks. The problem that they have to overcome is regaining trust of the entire planet. And it doesn't matter what bank you are, every single bank has a lot of problems with its customer base. You know, a lot just don't work for its customers, and it's a global problem. So everywhere on the planet, they're going to have to fix that before they innovate. And unfortunately, you know how the way startup trends are. If you take years to innovate, someone's going to rebuild your industry for you.
Bom, pessoal, infelizmente o pessoal da organização já falou que o nosso tempo acabou. A gente queria agradecer o Jonathan e eu, vai ter o pessoal também do comercial, outra turma lá na bancada do PayPal. Então, quem quiser depois tirar mais dúvida, quiser saber mais detalhes também das nossas operações aqui no Brasil e também da parte de tecnologia, pode ir lá, está todo mundo bem-vindo na nossa bancada. Um abraço, valeu pessoal.